Tuda, I bought my dream home and invited family for a housewarming. No one showed. Then Dad demanded, Dyke, toi muangoy na mo si va moi jia din du tan jia. Kong ai den, sao du bo toi are len. Thumbnail text, I bought my dream home and invited my family. No one showed. They want to buy my sister a $60,000 SUV. Then, my phone blew up with a text from my dad, sign over the deed. Now, Dyke, toi muangoy na mo si and moi jia din. Kong ai den, ho di mua cho gai toi cheek SUV 60 non du. Sao du, dien thoi toi no tung voi tin nan tu bo. Kai jii to na sang tendi. Nai bai jio. I bought my dream home and invited my family. No one showed. They want to buy my sister a $60,000 SUV. Then, my phone blew up with a text from my dad, sign over the deed. Now, my name is Wyatt. I am 29 years old, and if you asked my coworkers or anyone who knows me professionally, they would tell you that I am the guy who keeps the building from collapsing. Literally and metaphorically. I work in construction as a project coordinator. My entire life revolves around permits, strict schedules, budgets that cannot be broken, and spreadsheets that track every single nail driven into a piece of wood. I love clean lists. I love perfectly labeled boxes. I love when things go exactly according to the blueprint. I am steady. I am practical. But if you ask my family, I am something entirely different. I am not the project coordinator of my own life. I am the quiet, humming background system that makes all of their loud, chaotic noise possible. I am the walking, automated teller machine. I am the emergency fund that they never had to save for. Let me paint a picture of the dynamic for you. I have a younger sister named Cassidy. She is 26. If I am the solid concrete foundation, Cassidy is the fireworks display. She is golden. She is spontaneous, fun, and totally vision-led. In our family's vocabulary, vision-led is just a fancy, polite way of saying that she does whatever she wants, whenever she wants, without ever thinking about the financial consequences. And the craziest part? Our parents, Winston and Margaret, applaud her for it. They literally clap every time she has a new, expensive whim. For the last 4 years, I have been living a life of extreme, punishing discipline. For years straight. No vacations. No weekend getaways. No spontaneous dinners out with friends. I lived with roommates who were absolute nightmares. I am talking about guys who would let a sink full of dishes fossilize into a new life form before they would even think about buying dish soap. I ate cheap instant noodles. I picked up every single overtime shift my boss would legally allow me to work. I drove a beat-up used sedan that I bought with cash, and I spent my Sunday mornings watching internet tutorials so I could learn how to change the oil myself in the driveway because paying a mechanic was $20 too much. I did all of this for one single reason. I wanted a house. Not a mansion. Not a luxury penthouse. Just a house. A place where the doors actually shut and stayed shut. A place where I did not have to hear the booming volume of my dad's television through paper-thin apartment walls. A place where I did not have to share a refrigerator that was constantly overflowing with my sister's abandoned, rotting meal prep containers. I called my savings spreadsheet brick by brick. Every dollar was accounted for. I said no to 1,000 little things over those 4 years so that I could finally, desperately, say yes to the biggest thing of my life. While I was doing this, while I was agonizing over the price of a carton of eggs, my family was living a very different reality. They were comfortable, mostly because my unspoken financial safety net was always spread out underneath them. I was the guy who had spare batteries, the guy who had an emergency credit card, the guy who would silently pay the late fee so the power would not get shut off. I learned very early on in my life not to expect applause for doing the right thing. You just do the heavy lifting, you keep your mouth shut, and you keep moving forward. But this house was supposed to be different. This was my finish line. I thought, naively, that when I finally handed over that massive cashier's check, when I finally held the keys to something that was purely, legally mine, they would look at me and finally see me. Not as a resource. Not as a backup plan. But as Wyatt. The son who made it. the son who built something real. I thought the house would change the way they looked at me. I did not realize that it was only going to change the way they looked at my wallet. Last month, that massive yes finally happened. My offer was accepted. It was a small craftsman-style house. It had 2 bedrooms, a squeaky wooden hallway that sounded like old bones, and a tiny, ancient fireplace with a random tile right in the center that someone had painted with a crooked blue fish. It was not perfect, but it was mine. There was a lemon tree in the front yard and a porch swing that the previous owners left behind because I promised the old lady I would sit there on summer evenings. The day I got the keys, I walked inside and locked the deadbolt. The click of that lock was the loudest, most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter, and for the very first time in my 29 years of existence, it felt like I had found a space that truly fit the shape of my life. I wasn't renting 2 rooms of my life to strangers anymore. I was a homeowner. I was so proud that I broke my own rule of keeping a low profile. I took a selfie. I stood on the porch, held the shiny new keys up to the camera with the sold sign right behind my head, and I sent it to the family group chat. The caption was simple and excited. I wrote, "Housewarming next Saturday at 5 p.m. I am making chili and cornbread. We can light the fire pit if the wind cooperates." I watched the screen, waiting for the explosion of pride. What I got was a slow trickle of nothing. 3 generic confetti emojis from my dad, Winston. A message from my mom, Margaret, that just said, "Proud of you, son," but it felt so cut and paste, like she was replying to a distant cousin's promotion on social media. And from Cassidy, my sister, I got a sticker of a champagne bottle with the letters YAS. That was it. I told myself they were just busy. I brushed it off and spent the entire week preparing. I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect for them. I scrubbed the fronts of the cabinets until my knuckles ached. I lined all the kitchen drawers with fresh paper. I bought a can of matching paint and rolled it over every single tiny scuff mark on the baseboards. I went to a discount store and bought folding chairs and exactly 8 bowls that perfectly matched my new kitchen aesthetic. I even found a secondhand rug for the living room and strapped it to the roof of my beat-up car, driving 30 miles an hour the whole way home while the corners flapped in the wind like little victory flags. When Saturday finally arrived, I woke up at dawn. I strung yellow lights back and forth across the backyard fence. I bought 3 citronella candles that smelled vaguely like harsh lemon floor cleaner, but they looked nice on the patio table. I started the chili at noon, letting it simmer slow and low. I put a cooler out on the brand new wooden deck and filled it with ice. I bought 3 kinds of expensive soda, some local craft beers, and exactly 1 glass bottle of root beer, because my dad, Winston, likes to pretend he is a kid again when he is in a rare, good mood. I laid out the napkins. I set out the plastic spoons. I made sure every single detail was controlled and perfect, just like my spreadsheets at work. At 4:20 p.m., I slid the cornbread into the oven. The house smelled amazing. It smelled like a home. At 5 o'clock on the dot, I turned on the porch light. At 5:02, I looked out the front window at the street. It was totally quiet. Just my neighbor's cat walking across the sidewalk. I told myself they were just running late. Traffic is always bad on a Saturday. At 5:11 p.m., the street was still empty. I walked out to the backyard and lit the 3 citronella candles anyway. The flames flickered in the early evening breeze. At 5:18, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the family group chat and typed 3 letters, ETA question mark. A minute later, my mom sent back a message saying soon, followed by a red heart emoji. My dad did not answer at all. Cassidy did not answer either. I went back to the kitchen and stirred the chili. It made a thick, glossy bubble and popped. At 5:30, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't a text. It was a video uploaded to the family group chat by my mom. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and pressed play. The video started blurry, then came into sharp focus. They were not on the highway. They were not stuck in traffic. They were standing on the bright, polished concrete floor of a high-end car dealership. The fluorescent lights reflected off the hood of a massive, glossy red SUV. My mom's voice came through the phone speaker, muffled behind the camera. She sounded breathless, thrilled. "Look at our girl," she practically squealed. The camera panned over to the driver's side of the SUV. There was Cassidy, wearing oversized sunglasses inside the building, sitting behind the steering wheel of a vehicle that I knew, just by looking at the badge on the grille, cost at least $60,000. Cassidy turned the key, and the engine let out a low, powerful roar. Someone off-camera laughed. It was my dad. A salesman in a cheap suit started clapping, and then my parents started clapping too. The video ended. Below the video, Cassidy had typed a caption, "We did a thing. Big changes coming." I stood in the exact center of my new, perfectly clean kitchen. I just stared at the black screen of my phone. The silence of my house was suddenly deafening. The refrigerator cycled on with a low hum. I looked out the window at the driveway, where my beat-up, cash-bought sedan was parked. And then I looked back at the phone. They didn't forget my housewarming. They didn't get caught in traffic. They looked at the calendar, saw that it was the day I was opening the doors to the biggest accomplishment of my life, and they actively chose to go to a car dealership. They chose to stand around and applaud my sister for signing a predatory loan on a depreciating asset. They chose her noise over my milestone. I walked over to the stove. The chili made another slow, heavy bubble. I reached out and turned the burner completely off. I walked into the living room and turned on the new overhead lights for the very first time, expecting that warm, cozy house feeling to finally hit me from everywhere at once. It didn't. In the bright light, the room just looked like a stage set for a real estate listing. It was clean. It was ready. And it was completely, utterly empty. At 5:41 p.m., my phone rang. The screen lit up with a picture of my dad. I stood there, looking at the screen. A year ago, I would have answered on the first ring, panicked that something was wrong. Today, I let it ring. 1 beat. 2 beats. 3 beats. I listened to the sound vibrating against the kitchen counter. Then, I reached out and tapped the green button. I brought the phone to my ear. I didn't even get a chance to say hello. My dad's voice barked through the speaker, harsh and completely devoid of any apology. "We need to talk," he demanded. "Now." I did not respond to my dad immediately. I lowered the phone slightly, looking around the empty, bright living room. The silence was thick. I hung up the phone without saying a single word. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed one of the perfectly matching bowls I had bought just for them, and ladled a huge scoop of lukewarm chili into it. I ate it standing right over the sink. I did not cry. I did not smash a plate against the wall. I just chewed, and as I chewed, the dam in my brain finally broke, and 15 years of memories came flooding into the empty kitchen. This wasn't just about a missed housewarming. This was a pattern. A long, exhausting pattern where my money and my energy wore a costume. In my family, financial abuse pretended to be love. It pretended to be duty. It pretended to be discipline, depending on whatever fit the narrative of the day. Standing over that sink, I was suddenly 14 years old again. I remembered the exact smell of the grocery store where I got my very first part-time job, bagging groceries and sweeping floors for minimum wage. I was so proud of my first paper paycheck. I brought it home and laid it on the kitchen table. My dad, Winston, walked in, picked it up, and looked at the numbers. He didn't say he was proud. He told me that starting that month, I owed him $100 every 30 days for room and board. I remember the shock. I was a child. "It teaches you the real world, Wyatt," he had said, literally taking the crisp $20 bills out of my palm like I was paying a parking ticket. When I turned 16 and finally got the courage to ask my mom where all that money was going, Margaret just smiled her soft, manipulative smile and said, "It goes into the family, honey." When I asked my dad to see the family accounts, he just laughed in my face. By the time I was 18, I had learned to keep my own records. I started a secret note on my phone with dates, amounts, and excuses. I told myself I wasn't being petty. I was just drawing a map through a thick fog because my parents were so good at gaslighting me that I often thought I had imagined the whole road. And then there was Cassidy. When I was 14 and paying rent to sleep in my own childhood bedroom, Cassidy was 11 and getting expensive gymnastics lessons. When I got my driver's license, I rode the bus to work until I could afford a rusty junker. When Cassidy turned 16, my dad proudly declared, "A young woman needs something safe and reliable." He handed her the keys to a brand-new, dealer-fresh hatchback with a giant red bow on the roof. I remember standing in the driveway watching her jump up and down. I learned right then and there about the concept of sunk costs. In economics, a sunk cost is money you have already spent and cannot recover. You are supposed to move on and make rational decisions based on the future, not the past. But in my family, I was the sunk cost. I had invested years of obedience, years of my literal childhood wages, trying to buy their respect, hoping that one day the ledger would balance. It never did. Eating my cold chili, I realized it never would. The memories kept coming, filling up the empty space in the house. I washed my bowl, dried it meticulously, and set it face down on a towel. I was preparing for a war I hadn't formally declared yet. I thought about the family vacation when I was 24. I had finally saved up a little bit of money at my first real construction job. My mom begged me to book an expensive Airbnb near the beach for the four of us. "It will be a bonding experience," she promised. "We will all split the cost." I put the $2,000 rental on my only credit card. When we got there, it was a beautiful two-bedroom condo. Without even asking, my parents took the master bedroom. That left the second bedroom, which had a queen bed, and the living room, which had a broken pull-out couch with a metal bar right down the middle. Cassidy immediately threw her bags into the second bedroom. When I objected, pointing out that I was paying the bill, my mom pulled me aside. She used her glassy, tearful voice. "Wyatt, please don't be difficult. You know your sister struggles with her mental health. She needs a proper bed to have good energy for the trip. You're a man, you can handle the couch." I slept on that metal bar for 7 days. And they never paid me back a single cent for that rental. Whenever I brought it up, my dad would fold his arms and stare out the window, grumbling, "We are not asking for the moon, Wyatt. We are just asking you to be family." Cassidy had a spectacular talent for arriving right after the check was paid. She was a professional at saying, "I want," and my parents were professionals at softening her greed with buzzwords. They called her demands dreams, vision, and untapped potential. When she decided she wanted to be an entrepreneur, she started an artisanal candle business. She bought thousands of dollars of wax and essential oils on a credit card. She never paid sales tax. When the business predictably failed, she had a meltdown. Who do you think stepped in? I did. I quietly paid the $312 and some change to keep her credit from tanking. When she wanted to pivot to being a full-time content creator, she suddenly needed a better camera, a ring light, and a creative studio space downtown to get brand deals. I refused to co-sign the lease for that studio. I drew a line. The minute I said no, the vocabulary changed. I was no longer steady. I became cold, transactional, and stingy. "Don't be a ledger with your own blood," Margaret would scold me over the phone. "A real man provides for his people," Winston would bark. The phrase, "a man provides," covered everything. It covered the $198 for my dad's new truck tires when he accidentally miscalculated his payday. It covered the $280 homeowners association fee they let go to collections because my dad thought the association was a scam, plus the $50 late fee, plus the lawyer letter fee. It was always plural when it was an ask, "We need help, we are in a bind," and it was always singular when it was a "Thank you, Cassidy loves the camera, Dad loves the tires." I kept telling myself I was just helping where I could because it was easier than fighting the emotional blackmail. Sometimes, when you are manipulated for long enough, financial abuse starts to feel a lot like loyalty. I walked away from the sink and paced down the squeaky hallway of my new house. The premonitions had been there all along. The warning signs were flashing neon red for months, and I had just chosen to look the other way because I wanted a normal family so badly. The house was supposed to change the math. This house meant I could have a door with only my name on it. A deed where nobody else's initials could legally show up by surprise. This house meant no one could use the word "we" to mean you pay for it without me having to just smile and nod. But looking back at the last few weeks, the conversation suddenly took on a sinister new context. When I first told my parents that my offer was accepted, there was no celebration of my independence. Margaret had immediately said, "Oh, that is wonderful. You need to include a guest room so Cassidy has a place to stay while she figures out her next career move. We should also get Cassidy on your mailing address so her car insurance is lower for that zip code. Just temporarily, of course." Winston had clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Make sure it has a good garage. I can finally store my massive table saw and the extra lawn equipment there. A property is a family asset, Wyatt." And Cassidy? She had just looked at the photos of the kitchen and said, "Your house is going to be an amazing aesthetic. Can I record my morning routine videos at your kitchen island? Because the natural light there is perfect." I was so blinded by the excitement of signing the papers, so relieved to finally drop the heavy pen after signing my name 15 times at the title office, that I didn't hear what they were actually saying. They didn't see a young man achieving his dream. They looked at my house the exact same way a hawk looks at a field full of mice. They saw a brand new, untapped resource. The realization hit me so hard, I had to sit down on the floor of the empty hallway. The reason they went to the car dealership wasn't just to celebrate Cassidy. It was a strategic move. They went to buy her a $60,000 liability, fully knowing that I had just secured an asset. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. I pulled it out. It was a text message from my dad. He was tired of waiting for me to call back. I opened the message. It read, "Stop being dramatic. We are coming over tomorrow morning. Have your paperwork ready. We are putting my name on your deed to protect the asset, and we need to talk about pulling equity for your sister. Be a man for once." I stared at the glowing letters in the dark hallway. Sign over the deed. The sadness I had been holding onto evaporated entirely. The hurt of being abandoned at my housewarming burned away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. I stood up. I walked to the pantry door, took out a blank index card and a black marker. I didn't write a reply to my dad. I started writing a new set of rules. The Bank of Wyatt was permanently closed. If you are enjoying the story so far, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, drop a comment below and tell me what city you are watching from. Every single comment helps push this video to more people, and I truly appreciate your support. Now, let's get back to the story. I did not reply to that text message. I let the glowing words sit there on the screen until the phone naturally went dark. Sign over the deed. Be a man for once. The sheer audacity of it was so massive that my brain almost could not process it. I put the phone face down on the kitchen island. I walked to the front door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I walked through the house to the back porch. I sat down on the old, squeaky wooden swing that the previous owners had left behind. The night air was cool. I watched a large moth repeatedly bump against the yellow porch light, desperately trying to get to a heat source that was only going to burn it. For 29 years, I had been that moth. My family was the light. I kept throwing myself at them, offering my savings, my time, my credit score, hoping that if I just gave them enough, they would finally let me in. They would finally love me the way they loved Cassidy. But the light was never meant to warm me. It was only there to consume whatever I brought to it. Sitting there in the dark, the sunk cost fallacy finally broke its hold on my mind. I realized that my dad's definition of being a man was just being a compliant victim. His definition of family was a subscription service where he held the only remote control. I looked back at the house through the sliding glass door. The kitchen lights were still on. The tile with the crooked blue fish was visible above the fireplace. I had sacrificed 4 years of my youth, for years of vacations, for years of basic human comforts to buy those walls. I was not going to let them turn my sanctuary into another one of Cassidy's failed startup funds. I walked back inside. I went straight to the pantry door, where I had taped a blank white index card earlier in the evening. I took a thick black marker out of the drawer. I did not write a reply to my parents. I did not draft a long, emotional speech about how much they had hurt me by skipping my housewarming to buy a $60,000 car. Emotional speeches require an audience that actually cares about your emotions. Instead, I wrote down house rules. I wrote them in large, block letters. Rule number 1. No one registers anything at this address unless they legally live here. Rule number 2. No spare keys given out to anyone ever. Rule number 3. No one goes on my deed. Rule number 4. The Bank of Wyatt is permanently closed. No loans, no co-signing, no cash advances. I capped the marker. I stared at the list. It felt like I was writing a constitution for a newly independent country. For the first time in my life, the anxiety in my chest was completely gone. The heavy, suffocating weight of trying to please Winston and Margaret had simply vanished, replaced by a cold, smooth, titanium-strength resolve. I went to the kitchen sink, washed the leftover chili down the drain, and went to bed. I slept better that night, on a cheap mattress on the floor of my half-empty house, than I had ever slept in my entire life. I knew they were coming in the morning. And for the first time, I was ready. They arrived at 9 o'clock the next morning in a military-style convoy. I was drinking my coffee and looking through the peephole in the front door. First came Winston's heavy-duty pickup truck, parking halfway onto my grass. Then came Margaret's large SUV. And finally, pulling up the rear with temporary dealer tags still taped crookedly in the back window, was Cassidy's brand-new, shiny red $60,000 vehicle. They did not knock. They did not ring the doorbell. Winston just grabbed the door handle and rattled it aggressively, expecting it to be unlocked. When he realized the deadbolt was thrown, he pounded on the wood with the side of his fist. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and swung it open. I did not say hello. I just stood in the frame. Winston pushed past me instantly, holding a thick, plastic clipboard loaded with printed papers. Margaret followed right behind him, air-kissing the empty space next to my cheek. "We will bless the house properly later," she announced, as if she were a visiting dignitary. Cassidy strolled in last, holding her phone up high, recording a video for her social media followers. "You guys, look," Cassidy said into her camera, panning around my living room. "My brother finally got a place. It is a total fixer-upper, but the aesthetic has potential." They did not take off their shoes. They tracked dirt from the front yard directly onto my freshly scrubbed hardwood floors. They did not stop to look at the crooked blue fish tile I loved so much. They did not ask about the lemon tree. They treated my house like a rented conference room. Winston marched straight to the kitchen island and slapped his clipboard down onto the clean granite surface. The sound echoed in the quiet house. He clicked a pen. He was fully in his element. He loved being the project manager of other people's money. "Let's get down to it," he ordered, not looking up from his papers. "We have a lot of logistics to cover, and I have a golf tee time at noon." "Logistics for what?" I asked, leaning back against the refrigerator, crossing my arms. "First item," Winston began, flipping a page. "Your sister's insurance premiums on the new vehicle are incredibly predatory because she technically lives in a high-risk zip code with us. So, we are moving her vehicle registration and mailing address to this house. It is a much better neighborhood. She will park here sometimes to make it look legitimate if the insurance company ever checks." "No," I said. My voice was completely flat. Winston blinked. He looked up from the clipboard, genuinely confused, as if his television remote had suddenly stopped working. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, slowly and clearly. "There will be no vehicle registration at my address unless the person driving the vehicle lives inside this house." Margaret immediately deployed her soft, helpful voice. She touched my arm. "Wyatt, honey, she will be over here all the time anyway. She needs a stable base for her content creation. It is just paperwork." "It is literally a victimless crime," Cassidy chimed in, not looking up from her phone as she typed a caption. "Everyone does it. You are being completely obsessive over rules, as usual." "It is not about the rules," I said, looking directly at my sister. "It is about my name and my legal liability." "The answer is no." "Move to the next item." Winston sighed heavily, pinching the bridge of his nose like he was dealing with a stubborn toddler. "You are being ridiculously rigid," he grumbled. "Fine. We will handle the insurance another way." Let's move to the main agenda. He flipped to the back of his clipboard and pulled out a fresh, uncreased document. We need to get my name on the deed of this property, Winston stated. He did not ask. He just presented it as a mandatory next step in the administrative process of my life. For estate reasons. If anything happens to you, we need to make sure the asset is cleanly transferred back to the family trust without going through a lengthy probate court. If anything happens to me, I replied, keeping my heart rate perfectly steady, my last will and testament is already notarized and sitting in my desk drawer at work. 2 witnesses signed it last month. No one goes on my deed. Ever. Margaret's practiced smile immediately thinned into a hard, straight line. The sweet mother routine vanished. We are trying to protect you, Wyatt, she said, her tone sharp. You do not understand how the real world works. You are too trusting. What if you get sued? We need to secure the equity. Oh, I understand exactly how the world works, I said. And I know exactly what this is about. Cassidy let out a loud, exaggerated gasp. You are so selfish, she muttered, finally putting her phone down. We are literally your family, and you are treating us like strangers. Winston tapped the pen against the granite counter, his face turning red. Fine. If you want to be stubborn about the deed, then you need to at least pull some cash out of this place. We ran the numbers. You have good credit. You are going to refinance immediately and take a small equity line. Say, $80,000. We will help you manage the payments. There it was. The absolute, unvarnished truth sitting right out in the open. For what? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Cassidy needs a down payment for a commercial storefront, Winston explained, waving his hand dismissively. Her online candle boutique is ready for a physical retail space. Your money sitting trapped inside these drywall walls is lazy. It is doing nothing. We need to unlock it and put it to work for the family. Her boutique will pay the loan back in a year. Cassidy's boutique, I repeated, letting out a short, cynical laugh. You mean the candle business she has rebranded 3 different times? The business that has never turned a profit? You skipped my housewarming party to go buy her a $60,000 car, and now you are standing in my kitchen demanding that I take on $80,000 of debt to fund her next hobby. Cassidy puffed up her chest, stepping forward. You are being incredibly toxic and negative, she accused, pointing a freshly manicured finger at me. This is exactly why you don't get invited to fun things. Money is just energy, Wyatt. It is supposed to flow. You are hoarding it. I invited you to my house, I fired back, my voice finally rising, echoing off the high ceiling. I cooked for you. I waited for you. And you went to a dealership to applaud a loan you probably co-signed. Winston leaned over the island, planting both fists on the counter. He tried to use his physical size to intimidate me, a tactic that had worked since I was a child. Be a man, he growled. Step up and provide for your sister. You carry her now, and she will carry you later. You taught me how to be a man by charging me rent when I was 14 years old, I practically shouted. I stepped up. I paid for my own life. I did this entirely on my own. This house is not a group project. It is not a family asset. It is mine. The air in the room completely shifted. This was the precise moment in our family dynamic where I was supposed to back down, apologize, and open my wallet to keep the peace. Winston pointed his pen at me like a weapon. Listen to me very carefully. You do not slam doors on your own blood. If you do this, if you cut us out of this investment, do not come crying to us when you fail. You will be completely alone. I am already alone, I said, walking over to the front door and pulling it wide open. Get out. Do not leave your truck on my grass. And do not ever ask me for a single dime again. They left. Winston stormed out, furious in that quiet, dangerous way. Margaret refused to look at me. Cassidy revved the engine of her new car in the driveway, trying to drown out the silence. I watched the red taillights pull away, and then I pushed the door shut. I locked the deadbolt. The click was louder this time. The adrenaline crash after kicking your family out of your house is intense. Most people think the big, cinematic confrontation is the hardest part of cutting off toxic people. It is not. The big moment is just a burst of energy. The truly hard part is the Monday morning that follows. It is the boring, methodical work of building a fortress so they cannot sneak back in through the cracks. I woke up on Monday, called my boss, and took a personal day. I made a pot of black coffee and sat down at my kitchen island with my laptop. I did not feel sad. I felt like a project coordinator who had just discovered a massive structural flaw in a building, and I had exactly 8 hours to reinforce the concrete before the hurricane hit. First, I changed the codes on the smart lock on the front door. I completely wiped the temporary access codes I had originally set up for them for moving day. Next, I drove to the hardware store and bought a heavy-duty, locking mailbox. I installed it on the post by the street myself. Margaret had a habit of being overly helpful by gathering people's mail, which was really just her way of accidentally opening bank statements to monitor finances. That avenue was officially shut down. Then I got on the phone. I called my insurance agent. I explained the situation vaguely, stating there was a family dispute, and instructed her to put a strict password on my homeowners and auto policies. I told her not to accept any address changes, policy additions, or cancellations without me physically walking into her office with my driver's license. After that, I called all 3 major credit bureaus and placed a hard freeze on my credit profile. I knew Winston. I knew his definition of a family emergency, and I would not put it past him to try and open a credit card in my name using my social security number, justifying it as borrowing from the family pot. The most satisfying call was to the car dealership where Cassidy bought her SUV. I asked to speak to the finance manager. I gave them my name and my address. I told them that under no circumstances was anyone named Cassidy or Winston authorized to use my property as their primary residence for insurance or registration purposes. The guy on the phone sounded nervous. He said, yes, sir. Someone did actually mention a secondary family property over the weekend for the garaging address to get a better premium rate. We have not submitted the final paperwork to the state yet. Do not submit it, I warned him. If that address goes on her file, I will report the dealership to the state insurance board for facilitating fraud. I followed up that phone call with a detailed email, copying the dealership's general manager, so there was a permanent, time-stamped record. I created a new folder on my computer desktop. I named it House Paper Trail. If you grow up in a family like mine, where reality changes depending on who is yelling the loudest, you learn that paper trails are the only way you keep your sanity. By Tuesday, the psychological warfare began in earnest. In psychology, they call them flying monkeys, the extended family members and enablers who are sent by the main abusers to do their dirty work and drag you back into the toxic dynamic. I had put my phone on Do Not Disturb, but I still checked it twice a day, taking screenshots of everything to put into the paper trail folder. Margaret escalated to relentless phone calls. 6 missed calls in the morning, 9 in the afternoon. Her voicemails were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. They swung wildly from angry scolding to tearful begging. In one voicemail, she demanded I apologize for disrespecting my father. In the next, her voice was shaking as she whispered, "If you ever loved me, you will call me back. We can fix this. Family forgives." Then, 3 hours later, a cold, flat message. "I don't even know who you are anymore. You have become a monster." Winston did not leave voicemails. He sent texts that were just links. One was a link to a mortgage refinance calculator, implying the $80,000 demand was still on the table. Another was a link to a cheap aluminum storage shed at a big box store with a caption that read, "Be reasonable. I am dropping the table saw off this weekend." I did not respond to any of it. Silence is a mirror, and I was letting them look at their own crazy reflections. Cassidy, predictably, took the battle to the internet. She used her public social media stories to aim directly at me without using my name. She posted a photo of her steering wheel with a dramatic black and white filter. The text over the image read, "Sometimes the people closest to you laugh when you try to drive forward. Drive anyway. Cutting out toxic family members is self-care." The absolute irony of her calling me toxic while she was trying to steal my home equity almost made me laugh out loud. Her followers flooded the comments with support. "Haters are going to hate, girl," one wrote. Another person, someone I didn't even know, sent me a direct message with just a snake emoji. I blocked the stranger, closed the application, and went outside to water my lemon tree. On Thursday, Aunt Diane called. She is Margaret's older sister, a woman who has not paid for her own internet bill in 10 years because she guilt-trips her kids into doing it. She left a 5-minute voicemail. She started by humming a church hymn and then launched into a lecture. "Wyatt, honey, I heard what you did to your parents. It is a disgrace. Blood is thicker than water. You only get one family, and pride is a sin. You need to open your doors to them." I actually Googled that quote later while I was cooking dinner. I found out the original ancient proverb is actually, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb," meaning the bonds you choose to make are stronger than the family you are born into. I laughed out loud in my kitchen. It meant the exact opposite of what Aunt Diane thought it meant. I deleted her voicemail and blocked her number too. On Friday evening, I finally got a phone call that I actually wanted to answer. It was Nana Ruth, my dad's mother. She is 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only person in the entire bloodline who has ever seen Winston for exactly who he is. I picked up the phone. "Hi, Nana. They're incredibly mad at you," she said, matter-of-factly, skipping right over the small talk. "Winston has been pacing a hole in my living room rug complaining about your disobedience." "I know," I said softly. "I'm sorry if they are bothering you about it." "Don't apologize to me," she snapped, though her tone was warm. "Are you eating? You sound tired." "I am eating. I made a huge pot of chili. Put some in the freezer. It keeps for months," she advised. Then she paused. The background noise of her television went quiet. "Listen to me, Wyatt. Do not let your mother guilt you into feeding them with your walls. You built a good life. Keep the doors locked. They will drain you dry if you let them." "I will, Nana. I promise." Before hanging up, I asked her about her blood pressure medication. I knew Winston usually picked it up for her, using it as an excuse to complain about how much he does for everyone. I logged onto her pharmacy portal right then and there, paid for a 6-month supply with my own credit card, and set it to auto-ship directly to her front door. It was my way of showing the universe that I was not cold or stingy. I was happy to provide. I just refused to be extorted. The piece from Nana Ruth's call lasted exactly until noon the next day. I was at my laptop when an automated email arrived from the county property records office. When I bought the house, my real estate agent had strongly advised me to sign up for a free county alert system that sends an email anytime a document is recorded against your parcel number. The subject line read, "Fraud alert notification, rejected filing." I opened the email. My heart hammered against my ribs. Attached was a blurry, scanned PDF of a deed modification request form. The parcel number matched my house. Under the section labeled Addition of Grantee, someone had printed Winston's full legal name. There was no legal signature. There was no notary stamp. It was just an arrogant, sloppy attempt to file paperwork based purely on audacity, hoping a bored county clerk would just push it through the system without checking the ID. The county clerk had attached a brief note. "Filing rejected. Property is under a security freeze by the primary owner. Signature verification failed." I sat in my chair, staring at the blurry PDF. He actually tried to steal half my house. He bypassed me, went straight to the county government, and tried to quietly insert himself into my deed. Any lingering guilt I had about cutting them off evaporated into thin air. I printed the email. I walked over to my desk, opened the paper trail folder, and placed the printed sheet of paper right on top. The ledger was finally, permanently closed. That evening, my phone buzzed with a notification that bypassed my Do Not Disturb settings because it was sent through a new group chat. Margaret had created a fresh chat, adding me, Winston, Cassidy, and Aunt Diane. She named the group Family Emergency Crisis. The first message was from Margaret. It read, "We are having a mandatory family meeting on Sunday at 5 p.m. at our house. Your behavior has crossed the line into elder abuse against your father. We need to mediate this as a family. Attendance is non-negotiable. Elder abuse." The sheer delusion of the accusation was breathtaking. Winston was a perfectly healthy, 55-year-old man who played golf 3 times a week and had just tried to commit property fraud. I looked at the message. A year ago, a demand like that would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. I would have spent the entire weekend pacing, drafting arguments in my head, feeling sick to my stomach. Now, I felt nothing but a profound sense of exhaustion. I tapped the text box. I typed 4 words. I won't be there. I hit send. Then, I permanently left the group chat, deleted the thread, and went into my phone settings to block their numbers completely. It was over. No more flying monkeys. No more manipulative voicemails. No more clipboards. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter and walked out to the garage. I grabbed my tools, a level, and a magnetic stud finder. I walked back into the squeaky hallway of my house. I found a perfectly blank space on the wall, right next to the front door. I ran the stud finder across the drywall until it beeped, marking the solid wood frame behind the paint. I held up a thick, beautiful piece of floating oak shelving that I had bought months ago. I checked the level. I picked up my drill, drove the heavy screws through the metal bracket, and anchored it directly into the studs. The house seemed to take a deep breath as the screws fit securely into the wood. I stepped back and admired the shelf. It was perfectly straight. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a small ceramic bowl, and placed it right in the center of the new wood. I took my house keys out of my pocket and dropped them into the bowl. They made a sharp, satisfying clink. Those keys belonged to me, and only me. At 5 o'clock on Sunday, the exact moment they were sitting in their living room, furiously waiting for an apology that was never going to arrive, I was in my backyard. I fired up my small charcoal grill. I cooked 2 thick cheeseburgers. When they were done, I put one on a paper plate and walked across the street. I knocked on the door of the elderly woman who had waved at me on moving day. I handed her the plate. Just made extra, I smiled. She beamed, thanked me, and told me her name was Clara. I walked back to my house. I sat on my porch swing, ate my burger, and watched the string lights flicker on as the sun went down. I thought about the phrase Winston loved to use, family asset. I wondered how many years of my life I had wasted confusing the word family with the concept of shared financial access. I was no longer an asset. I was just a man eating dinner in his own backyard. Exactly 1 week after the housewarming party that wasn't, I hosted the housewarming party that was. I didn't make a big deal out of it. I just casually invited a few people I actually liked. I invited Nolan, the guy from work who had witnessed my will and always covered for me when I had to run to the permitting office. I invited 3 guys from my Thursday night pickup basketball game. And I invited Clara from across the street, who brought a tiny potted succulent as a gift. I didn't stress about the aesthetics. I didn't scrub the baseboards. I pulled the giant container of frozen chili out of the freezer, thawed it out, and heated it up on the stove. I set out the exact same cheap plastic spoons I had laid out the week before. The house was loud. Not the chaotic, demanding noise of my family, but a good, warm noise. Nolan told a hilarious story about a concrete truck accidentally pouring its load into the wrong trench at a job site. The basketball guys argued about sports statistics on my secondhand rug. Clara sat at the kitchen island, sipping the root beer I had originally bought for my dad, telling us about what the neighborhood looked like in the 1970s. At 7:40 p.m., my phone, which was sitting face down on the counter, lit up with an unknown number. It was probably a blocked voicemail coming through a third-party app or another flying monkey trying to deliver a final threat. I looked at the glowing edge of the phone. Nolan stopped mid-sentence and looked at me, then at the phone. "You need to get that," he asked. I reached out, picked up the phone, and powered it off completely. "No," I said, tossing it into a drawer. "It's just spam." Around 9 o'clock, one of the basketball guys looked around the living room, pointed at the crooked bluefish tile on the fireplace, and smiled. "This place is great, Wyatt," he said. "It really feels like you. It's quiet, but solid." I went to bed at 11 that night. I left the dirty chili bowls sitting in the sink. I didn't clean up a single thing. I woke up at 6:30 the next morning. The sunlight was filtering through the green leaves of the lemon tree in the front yard, casting warm shadows across my bedroom floor. The house was incredibly quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt completely full. I put on a sweatshirt, walked out the front door, and went down to the street to check my new, locked mailbox. I turned the small brass key. Inside was a single piece of junk mail. It was a glossy advertisement for a local pizza place, but right there on the front, printed in stark black ink, was my name, Wyatt, and below it, my address. I ran my thumb over the printed letters. I looked back at the house, the small craftsman with the squeaky floors and the strong foundation. The ledger was closed. The emotional bankruptcy was over. I had finally stopped trying to buy a family that only wanted to spend me. I walked back inside, locked the door behind me, and started the coffee maker. So, what do you think? Was I too harsh to cut them off entirely to protect what's mine, or is family truly worth sacrificing your own financial and emotional security? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that button and ring the bell so you won't miss the next story. See you in the next video.